You are watching the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Disaster relief continues across the Southeast. How many are still without power and water, and why FEMA had to stop recovery efforts in North Carolina over the weekend?
For 4 straight years, she's imported an army of illegal alien gang members and migrant criminals from the dungeons all over the world.
Border politics dominating messaging on the campaign trail. What Trump revealed about his deportation plan and how the Harris campaign is pushing back. And then NASA launches its largest planetary science spacecraft ever. What they hope to find at the end of the 1.8 billion mile journey for the Europa Clipper. This is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, I'm Dee Gatton. A very happy Monday to you. And right now, recovery efforts are continuing as we come on the air in the Southeast after back-to-back hurricanes of Helene and Milton. The death toll in Florida from Milton has risen to 21, many of whom were killed by the more than 100 tornadoes spawned by the winds of the hurricane. Now, over the weekend, officials raised the death toll to 250 from Helene, whose flooding impacted a far greater area. As many as 4 million in Florida were without power last week. That number is now under 330,000 rather, most of whom are in Pinellas and Hillsborough counties, near where Milton made landfall last Wednesday night. In North Carolina, 16,000 customers are still without power nearly 2 weeks after Helene crossed over, bringing tremendous flooding to the northwest parts of the state. But more than that, as many as 290,000 people in Asheville, North Carolina, do not have access to clean running water. There is no set timeline for when the water in the region will be restored. In North Carolina, 44-year-old William Jacob Parsons has been arrested and charged with making threats against FEMA employees. He was released this afternoon on a $10,000 bond. FEMA had to temporarily pause aid deliveries in North Carolina over the weekend due to reports of armed threats against the agency, but resumed efforts on Sunday. Yesterday, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas suggested misinformation is part of the problem.
We have individuals in need of assistance who are entitled to assistance who aren't seeking it because of the false information. We need individuals, elected officials, people who have the platform to really debunk this false information, and we're not seeing enough of that.
But there are some concerns with how FEMA has been conducting their recovery efforts and whether they have enough funding to assist everyone who needs it. But despite mounting pressure to return to Washington, D.C., House Speaker Mike Johnson says they have what they need. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins breaks it down.
The devastating storms have passed. Now communities across the Southeast continue trudging down the long road to recovery.
We're asking you all for your prayers.
It's totally destroyed. Looked like somebody just came and dropped bombs everywhere.
Some remote mountainous areas of Appalachia left waiting on FEMA for nearly 2 weeks, some without food, power, and water.
It is an extraordinary sense of betrayal and being left behind. People are worried that their government doesn't care about them.
Civilians taking matters into their own hands. A group of volunteer helicopter pilots flying aid to hard-to-reach areas.
The first 7 days we were here, I didn't see anyone from FEMA or anything like that.
They've been dubbed the Redneck Air Force.
Civilian pilots, ex-military pilots, it's a mix of everything.
The scale of the loss prompting calls for lawmakers to return to Washington to approve more money for FEMA. Speaker Mike Johnson standing firm, money is not the current problem.
Congress appropriated $20 billion additional dollars to FEMA so that they would have the necessary resources to address immediate needs. And so we put that into the coffers. I just checked, Margaret, as of this morning, less than 2% of that funding has actually been distributed.
On Sunday, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas appearing to concede FEMA does have enough funding to make it through the election.
So immediate versus rebuilding. So you could wait until after the election. Do you know how much you'll need?
We don't know.
Okay.
We are still, for example, assessing the damage.
The House and Senate will return to Washington in mid-November. Speaker Johnson says this is when they could work on passing additional funding for FEMA to help with the long-term recovery process. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
And there is a new disturbance in the Atlantic that could potentially develop into a tropical depression later this week or early next week. According to the National Hurricane Center, AL94 has a 50% chance of forming over the next 7 days. The disorganized low pressure system is located hundreds of miles west of the Cabo Verde Islands and will continue moving west towards warmer waters. But some meteorologists believe that wind shear will likely hinder development into a serious storm. New tonight, a train operator is dead and 23 people are injured after a train accident in New Jersey this morning. Officials said part of a tree was on the Riverline light rail track in Mansfield Township. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy said he'd been briefed and an investigation has begun. New Jersey Transit Police are working to determine how the tree ended up on the tracks. 2 deputies were shot this morning during a traffic stop in Fulton, Missouri. The Callaway County Sheriff says that the deputies learned of a 37-year-old Texas man who had several felony warrants against him was driving through. Shots were fired as the deputies attempted to make an arrest. The fugitive died at the scene. Both deputies were rushed to the hospital but are in stable condition. A manhunt is on for one of 2 suspects who posed as utility workers to get into a home, claiming there was a gas leak late last week in Michigan. Police say the pair killed a 72-year-old man and duct taped his wife in the basement on Friday in Rochester Hills, about 20 miles north of Detroit. Saturday, 37-year-old Carlos Hernandez was arrested in Shreveport, Louisiana. He's charged with felony murder and 2 counts of unlawful imprisonment. Meantime, his accomplice is still on the run. The trial of the man accused of murdering 2 teen girls from a small Indiana town is now underway. 52-year-old Richard Allen is facing multiple charges, including murder. Prosecutors say he killed 13-year-old Abigail Williams and 14-year-old Liberty German while the girls were hiking outside the town of Delphi in 2017. The trial is expected to last about a month. Right now, former President Donald Trump is holding a town hall in the Pennsylvania suburb of Oaks. Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris have made several stops in Pennsylvania, hoping to shore up support to win the 19 electoral votes of the biggest battleground state. While yesterday in Arizona, Trump gave new specifics on his plan to secure the border. National correspondent Christine Frizzell has more on how the Harris campaign is comparing his words with his actions.
The border once again getting top billing in the battleground state of Arizona. Former President Donald Trump pitching a plan to hire 10,000 more border agents and to give raises to those already serving.
After I win, I will be asking Congress immediately to approve a 10% raise.
The National Border Patrol Council lending their support right back.
We strongly support and endorse Donald J. Trump.
Donald Trump also laying out a plan to go after migrant criminals using a law from 1798 called the Alien Enemies Act, a wartime authority that allows for subjects of a hostile nation to be apprehended, restrained, secured, and removed. Trump also wanting to implement an automatic 10-year jail sentence for those who return to the country after being removed, and the death penalty for any migrant who kills an American citizen or law enforcement officer. Migrant criminals have been making news with a focus on the Venezuelan street gang Tren de Aragua, including at this Aurora, Colorado apartment complex.
The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs.
It's tough talk the Trump campaign is betting will pay off, with polls consistently showing his border policies are far more popular than those of the Biden-Harris administration. It's one reason Harris has moved to the center on immigration policy.
I have taken on transnational criminal organizations that traffic in guns, drugs, and human beings, and I've prosecuted them.
The Harris campaign slamming Trump for suggesting he'd hire new border agents despite convincing Republicans to tank a legislative plan that did just that.
Trump blocked the only thing we had for his own political gain.
Differences on full display in the final weeks of the campaign. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
Now for a look at the latest poll numbers showing Harris's support slipping nationally. Look right here. Harris lost her 5 percentage point lead in a single month in NBC's latest poll that's tied 48 to 48. A survey from ABC Ipsos also shows voters moving in Trump's direction, giving Harris only a 2% lead, 50 to 48%. Last month, that was 52 to 46. And a CBS YouGov poll has Harris ahead of Trump, 51 to 48, down from September's poll that had her at 52%. Van Miller is dismissing the case against him that he posed any threat to Donald Trump. The 49-year-old Nevada man was arrested Saturday on suspicion of possessing a loaded firearm and a high-capacity magazine outside of Donald Trump's rally in Coachella, California. Miller said in a video on Rumble he supports the former president and he voluntarily notified authorities at the checkpoint that he had 2 legally owned firearms secured in the trunk of his car before being detained. A federal investigation is now underway into the matter. Miller was released on a $5,000 bond, and online records show he is scheduled to appear in court next year. New developments. The machinist strike against Boeing has entered its 2nd month and contract talks are at a standstill. Federal mediators were unable to bridge the gaps last week, but the acting labor secretary is now in Seattle to help. Meantime, Boeing announced on Friday they will cut about 17,000 jobs, impacting executives, managers, and blue-collar workers alike to save money. But striking workers believe this is just part of the game Boeing is playing to make them end the strike.
It's like a chess game. What's your opponent going to do? You know, unfortunately, they're like an opponent right now.
Are we next on the chopping block? Maybe we should just fold. I mean, I just feel like it's a scare tactic.
The company says this strike has cost them $5 billion this past month, and they have lost $25 billion since 2019 due to ongoing safety issues, whistleblower reports, and intense scrutiny over company culture. More than 1,200 hotel employees are now on strike in Boston. Today, Omni workers joined Hilton workers who had already walked off the job to demand things like higher pay and automatic daily room cleaning. Several temporary strikes began last month. Now, the union members plan to continue until they reach new agreements. Service at the hotels could be limited as it goes on. Coming up, from Clinton to Obama, how the Harris-Walz campaign is turning to their party's biggest names in these final weeks before Election Day. Then, how an Ohio man is helping victims of Hurricane Helene as he makes his 4th trip to North Carolina since the storm hit. And later, fruity flavored vapes marketed to teens are supposed to be banned. A concerning new discovery about the availability of these potentially harmful products. We're back in 90 seconds. Former President Donald Trump campaigns in Pennsylvania. Vice President Kamala Harris is also in that state right now for a rally in Erie. Harris also released new policy proposals today targeting black men. One of her ideas is to give $1 million loans to black entrepreneurs and others. Just 3 weeks from Election Day, polls show the race is essentially neck and neck. The National News Desk, Atra Elnishar, reports on how the Harris-Walz campaign is turning to their most high-profile surrogates to shore up the voters they need to win the race.
We need you.
From former presidents to celebrities.
Madam Vice President.
The Harris-Walz campaign adding star power to their strategy for securing voting blocks absolutely necessary for a Democratic victory. Some in the party growing nervous about whether they can count on their support. Former President Barack Obama back on the campaign trail, starting in must-win Pennsylvania, a state he won twice, delivering a blunt message to black voters.
We have not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running. I'm speaking to men directly now. Part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president.
A fresh New York Times Siena College poll of likely black voters shows about 8 in 10 say they'd vote for Vice President Harris, compared to the 9 in 10 who supported the Biden-Harris ticket in 2020. Harris is turning to another former president, one with Southern roots, to shore up support in Georgia, a state she and Biden won in 2020 by fewer than 12,000 votes.
It is literally possible that the whole election could be decided here.
Despite her husband no longer being the nominee, First Lady Jill Biden remains a valuable campaign asset, with a 5-day, 5-battleground state tour through Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. There's a clear gender gap in this race. Polls show Harris has the advantage with women voters, while Trump leads with men. And to close that gap with men, the Harris-Walz campaign is turning to non-traditional niche groups like girl dads for Harris-Walz, hunters and anglers for Harris-Walz, and white dudes for Harris.
End of the day, you're your own man. It's your call.
We're learning in Harris's effort to win over voters beyond the traditional Democratic base, she'll sit down for an interview with Fox News on Wednesday from Battleground, Pennsylvania. In Washington, I'm Atra Elnishar reporting.
100 U.S. troops will soon be headed to Israel in order to operate the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, advanced anti-missile system that will be deployed in Israel. Pentagon officials say the missiles will help bolster Israel's air defenses following attacks by Iran and could deter future attacks. Israel has yet to respond to Iran's unprecedented attack 2 weeks ago that consisted of nearly 300 ballistic missiles fired, most of which were shot down. The United States has been pressuring Israel to show restraint, while some in Israel suggest the coming effort in Iran could draw further attacks from the Islamic Republic. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start with Ohio residents traveling to North Carolina to help hurricane victims. Bob Lester of Ohio and his friend are in North Carolina bringing space heaters to Hurricane Helene victims. It's his 4th time going there to help. He said he worked to get 6 helicopters to rescue people from the mountains and partnered with a fruit farm to collect donations.
Then I got a phone call wondering if we had any access to medical oxygen. We heard that all the ambulances and fire stations in some of the areas were out of O2. And I said, well, sure enough, I have access to medical oxygen, and we went over to Gear Gas in Columbus and loaded up all their available big oxygen bottles.
Once Lester and his friend drop off the latest round of supplies, they plan to make another trip with the donations from the fruit farm.
The examples are endless, and so is the frustration. Crimes of violence caught on camera, often at the hands of juveniles. Betsy Smith with the National Police Association says criminals don't care anymore if they're caught on camera because there's simply no accountability.
We need to understand that as a society, what we are seeing is the result of not punishing, not prosecuting criminals to the fullest extent of the laws.
Smith says even criminals once had a code of conduct. Mothers, children, the elderly off limits, but not anymore.
The events that put each of our families here are different, but the loss is still felt the same. Each of these firefighters has a unique story. How they got into the fire service, their hobbies, their families, their friends, and how they gave back to their communities.
The annual ceremony, known as Firefighters Memorial Day, honors the memory of firefighters killed in the line of duty. This year, 36 more firefighters' names will be added to the Firefighters Memorial Wall. Governor Newsom walked in the procession that included bagpipe music to honor the firefighters and honor guards from fire departments across the state.
Well-deserved honor. And coming up next here, the progress made to crack down on the makers and sellers of illegal vapes in the U.S. That's coming up right after this. The FDA has approved only a few dozen e-cigarette products, but there are hundreds of unauthorized, potentially dangerous vaping products being openly sold in stores. Now, as national investigative correspondent Lisa Fletcher reports, U.S. lawmakers are blasting top agencies for failing to get the problem under control.
Tobacco smoking has all but gone away among America's youth. But there's real concern that a slickly marketed new offender will form a new generation of addicts.
These are being intentionally designed to get kids addicted. They want kids addicted.
According to new data, nearly 8% of high school students use e-cigarettes, and nearly 90% of them use a flavored product. While the numbers declined, years-long concerns still exist. We highlighted kid-friendly, fruity-flavored vapes back in 2022, when they were supposed to be banned for good. But in just the last few weeks, our cameras uncovered flavors like rainbow, sour apple ice, and lemonade, still for sale right out in the open at stores in the D.C. area. Putting a fun-filled spin on a sinister reality, says Jim Carroll, former director of the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy.
These pens that look innocent or they sound like candy, they're not. They're dangerous, they're not regulated, they're not inspected. They can have hundreds of times of the amount of nicotine that they should have.
Some have reportedly contained heavy metals, even the deadly substance fentanyl. Others have caused serious health problems. And it's not just the fruity flavors attracting kids. New age vape devices we found online mirror cell phones, have Bluetooth, and come preloaded with digital games. Others are disguised to look like a common highlighter, and they're flooding the market from China.
China has banned flavored e-cigarettes, yet they make them and sell them here in the United States. What does that tell you?
Chinese government is not a friend to the United States. Let there be no mistake. They know exactly what they're doing by sending these dangerous products to the U.S. They're wiping out an entire generation.
Right under the nose of our federal government, as pointed out in a heated congressional hearing this summer.
Do something. What in the hell have you been waiting for?
FDA and Department of Justice officials grilled for inaction that lawmakers say could have wiped these products out of the hands of kids years ago.
Take a look at this photo. It was taken by my staff just a few days ago at a vape shop less than 1 mile removed from the FDA's headquarters. Not a single one of these products has been authorized by the FDA. None of them.
The FDA told us that it has rejected more than 26 million new tobacco product applications and issued more than 1,300 warning letters to makers and sellers of illegal vapes. So far, the agency has fined 230 retailers. This summer, the FDA partnered with the Department of Justice, promising its new task force will aggressively address the illegal distribution and sale of vapes.
What do you think is going to happen as a result of that?
It was a great headline. I haven't seen any action yet, so I'm anxious for them to really start cracking down, making arrests, and getting these products off the streets.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
Coming up next, what NASA hopes to learn from its new mission to Jupiter as the spacecraft embarks on a 6-year journey. Right now, a spacecraft is on its way to Jupiter to study an icy moon called Europa. NASA confirmed Europa Clipper entered space today after lifting off from Florida on a SpaceX rocket. The launch was scheduled for last Thursday, but was delayed because of Hurricane Milton. The mission will help scientists understand if Europa could support life or did in the past. Europa Clipper won't reach Jupiter until 2030 after traveling for 1.8 billion miles. That's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. Thanks for watching. We'll see you at 10.